the channel. Behind me is my F430 Spider. Why is it here? Because we're talking about the G rear-wheel drive conversion? The answer is quite simple. The F430 is one of the funnest cars I have. One of its strengths is rear-wheel drive. Now, of course, that is in the fun department. Now, going as fast as possible, I actually do prefer all-wheel drive. But the reality is that the G is an older car. And some of us hang on to it because it's a manual. Some of us just love the car. It is a great value. I will tell you something though that will lend a new lease on life for that car. And that is the conversion. The reason why is it will just change it into something completely different. As far as benefits, well, from the top, you gain the weight savings. Not to mention clutch life, especially those of you that have e-gears. But the main thing for me to consider is that weight loss actually changes the characteristics of the car, especially if you have a good chassis tuner involved. Change some settings in the toe, and lo and behold, you can either have more oversteer or less oversteer. So it'll be a huge difference. For me, the motive is making the G just a different car and more fun. One major advantage to this also is that you can experiment with the G without spending a whole lot of work and time on it. And how you do that is you can just remove the drive shaft. Then you can convert it to rear-wheel drive, see if you like it, and then if you do like it, you can pull the front differential, axles, and save weight as well. After you change to rear-wheel drive, you can see if you get as addicted to it as I do and decide if you want to stay in that. As with anything, there are a few downsides, so you would have to determine whether or not it's worth it to you. Notably, of course, is that I'm smart enough to know that myself, I cannot drive as fast in the back roads in rear-wheel drive than with the all-wheel drive pulling me along. That becomes a problem when, I don't know, speed deranged lunatics like my friend JC come to visit and takes his Ferrari and just dusts me. I need every advantage I can get. I guess at this point, I have another option such as the SV. So it's a no-brainer for me to change things up and make the car a bit more exciting and lively. Well, let's get into it and see how it goes. The first thing we're going to need to do is pull the front under tray. That'll give us access to the front differential and the axles. The difficult part with that is that we need a Torx 27 and there are tons of screws holding that front under tray in. All the hardware's out, so now all I have to do is work the drains, there are 4 of them, through the panel and see if I can work it out. For those of you that are interested, I did a count on the screws so you would know, and it ended up being 29. So I used my Torx 30 and pulled down all 29 screws in order to pull the under tray off. You will also need to pull the 2 screws that hold the fender liner in because that allows it to go up to pull the under tray out. The next thing we have is this panel, which is aluminum, and I understand it's carbon fiber to save weight on the Super Leggera, so that could be a welcome addition in my future. But you can see, again, there's a ton of hardware. It's a Torx 30 to pull it down. This serves actually as multiple functions. One is it would contain the drive shaft if something was to happen. It is also used to help in structural rigidity. Let's go ahead and see if we can pull it down. Okay, the plate underneath the drive shaft is now out. So we can get a good visual of what's going on here. What I'm seeing is 6 bolts in back, 6 bolts in front, and a center support right here. So some things to note are the bolts back here on the rear flange are white and the fronts are painted yellow. And I believe you want to keep them specific because of torsional load. That is most likely why they have them that way, is what I think, because I don't see paint going onto the flange. If you saw it on the flange, then typically the factory's using it to see if you had moved the bolts. Okay. The drive shaft should be balanced on its own, along with all the other components. However, I like to try and put everything back the exact same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to white this right here, and I'm going to paint a black line, just right here, a light one, and that will tell me to make sure I put everything back the way it was. Okay. And let's go up to the front. I'll do the same thing. Okay. Right here. Take this. Just like that. You work on enough stuff, and you run into so many odd problems that you want to try and eliminate anything that's going to be a problem putting everything back together. I know that we need to pull these bolts out to drop the back. Then it's best to try and drop the front and then pull this center out in the end to bring it down, and I may need a helping hand for that. But I already tried to test these, as you know, to get the torque. And so when I did that, it actually turned the whole driveline. So what I did was I actually put it in first gear, since this is the manual, and I've got the parking brake on, and that solved the problem. The only downside is that in between, we're gonna have to drop the car down, take it out of gear, take the parking brake off, rotate everything so we make it 180 degrees, and then we have to lock everything down again. Okay, with the front and rear flange bolts out, the only thing that is holding it is the 2 bolts for the support bearing. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and pull those out while I try and hold the drive shaft, or propeller shaft in Lambo terms. This would probably be best suited for 2 people. However, at this point in time, I only have my camera woman, who is taking care of the video for you guys, and myself. So let's see if I can pull this off, okay? Okay, so what I think the best thing to do is to create distance. So what I'm going to try and do is buckle it down in the center and see if that clears me in the front, which it did create enough clearance there. And I'll try and pull right off the back. And voila, there we go. So the front propeller. Before I get into pulling the diff and the axles, the first thing I recommend is pulling the axle bolts. That way everything's all connected, and hopefully I can just hit it with an impact and pull it off. But that bolt right there takes a 17mm hex. Well, as you can see, that did not go as planned because the hub and axle were spinning. So I had to get my assistant Drew to climb up there into the G, and I sent back in the titanium stud lugs. She's gonna apply the brakes, and we'll try again with a bigger impact. Okay, well I'm not having much luck here because that was a 3/4 inch impact. You can see it didn't move at all. So now we're up to a 1-inch breaker bar. Let's see if I've got enough strength to break it free. Whew, all right, well, as you can see, Drew's super leg strength and a bit of luck. The 3rd time is the charm. So the bolt is broken free. All I have to do is back it out with the impact. The next thing I need to do is pull the flange bolts for the front axles that connect it to the front differential. That way we can pull the front differential out and axles will be last. Now, when I looked up there, I see 6 bolts on each axle flange. And what I found is they are 10mm spline drives. In order to not have Drew sitting in the car burning her time and then I will pay the price later, I used a 3/8 inch impact with the 10mm 12-point spline drive on the front. That allowed me to just suck them out without anyone holding the brake for me. The 3/8 inch impact made quick work of the axle flange bolts. So those are all pulled back. Now we can get a good look at what's going on under there. So if you look right there, you can see the flange of the differential, and there's the axle. I'm gonna go ahead and move it so you can see it. You can see we could pull it back by hand now. I'll leave it there so it doesn't come down, but that'll give us the clearance we need to drop the differential. After both axles are clear, there is a sensor on the differential. I am assuming that that is a temp sensor, but if you carefully pull back the rubber boot, you can see there's a clip right there. It's spring loaded. You just push the button, pull it down, and there it is. It could just be tied up and out of the way once the differential has been removed. Alright, so I hope everything is free and clear. We need to drop the front differential. So as you can see right here, we have 2 bolts I need to pull down. I can use a 13mm socket to release the rear brace. In the front, I believe these 2 bolts hold a frame to the front side, and it uses an 18mm socket. So let's start by pulling the hardware and see where we go. Oh, shit. Okay, that definitely looks like it freed the front differential. You can see it kind of moving on the bumper jack. There's a clip right here with a harness. We need to try and move the differential to this side to clear that, and at the same time pull the axles back. So I will see what I can get done here. Well, it would appear it's become a bit of a fight. I just can't get the diff down. I am so close, but clearing the axles on both sides, it just doesn't want to come down because this frame rail is in the way. But since the frame rail actually comes out, I think the best thing would be is to try and remove the front mount. That way I can hopefully move the diff forward to get some more clearance. We'll give that a shot now. Now, it's held on by 4 nuts. Those nuts use a 13mm, so I'll try and pull those now. Okay. All right. Now we'll see if we can pull the bracket. And 2 washers are gonna fall. Just let them go. Okay. All right, I'm gonna try and push the diff forward. Okay, with that struggle being said, I was able to move the differential more forward, and I had to drop the tail. That allowed me to get it low enough to remove the axle on the driver's side. So now I will try and work it by bringing it lower, and I need to shift it to the driver's side to clear the passenger side axle. There it is. All right, so we're clear there, and I'm gonna rotate a little bit this way, and of course watch that harness. Let's see if it works. So you can see it's angled back a lot right now. We're really tilted towards the driver's side, the tail of the diff, to give us enough room to come down. Watch that harness. And I'm gonna push the differential a little over to this side. There's also a harness on this side, but there we go. Just enough. I'm gonna try and actually push the harness above the differential. That way I don't tear it up coming down. All right, here we go. All right, there it is. Okay, now that the diff's down, we'll get this out of the way and pull the front axles. Now, granted, I am tired because it's been a long day, but the diff felt insanely heavy. But with it out, you can get a nice view of what's up there. Now I'll pull the axles. Pretty straightforward to just snake them through on both sides. There are a couple of options when it comes to the conversions of the stub axles. The first option would be you could take yours apart. Of course, the only problem is if you want to go back, you will have to get axles again. Therefore, my choice is to not disassemble the axles. That way I can have them set aside in case I want to convert back to all-wheel drive. And the other option is to purchase stub axles. Now, on a lot of forums, there are people that have done these conversions, and they talk about all sorts of different part numbers and savings you can get by chasing the parts down. That's great, but for me, I'm just always short of time, and I've had good luck working with Reed Performance, so I just called them and they have the stub axles in stock and sent them right over. That way I didn't have to chase them down. Let's take just a quick look at the stub axles. They're very nice pieces. So this is what they sent over to me. They're not very heavy. They are not made out of tie. There's no tie option at this point, but I do see the Audi Volkswagen symbol, so it does look to be an OE part, and both of them are very nice. Before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and take the wiring harness tie down and put that back into position. And then when we go ahead and put the stub axles in, I will use red Loctite on the bolts this time and send them in with a 1/2 inch impact. I've never had a problem doing that before, and that way the red Loctite is just a little bit of insurance. So I put red Loctite on the axle bolt, the stub axle is in position, and try and send it in. And there we go. Now I'll send back the drive shaft cover and support, which now is pretty much just a support since the drive shaft is no longer there. Well, alrighty then, it's time to send the wheels and tires back up. Once you're able to work the under tray into the front lip, the tray will stay in position and you can leave the bottom edge down. Now looking in there, it gives you great access to the drains. One thing that I've learned is the drains are tight. What I recommend is using some silicone spray. That allows the drains to slide through the tray quite easily. Before you close up the under tray, you want to remember that we have that lead down there for the diff oil temp. So we'll just take a quick look at that. Okay, so you can see the lead right here. What I did was I cut a vacuum cap down just to make a plug. Now what I'll do is I'll zip tie the lead to itself on the clip on the frame, and we're good to go. Now I just have to send up all the hardware. For me, the most important part of this whole equation is how much did I save? So we can take a look here. You can see that on the scales I've set up the drive shaft bridging 2 plus the hardware, the front mount for the differential. We have the differential over there and the axles. Let's take a look and see what the computer has to say. Well, there you go, 118. 118 pounds is a healthy savings. Now, I didn't weigh the stub axles before I put them in, but they didn't weigh very much. So I believe we could say it's a solid 115 and call it good. Well worth the savings in my opinion. There you have it. Everything comes full circle. That job was not very bad and the benefits are immense. Of course, this is something all of you would need to weigh whether or not it's worth it for you. But again, like I said, if you don't like it, just turn it all back. That's a great thing about doing a mod like that, because if you start modifying things, as many of you know, that will create a problem potentially down the road. Now I'm just going to say a few things as far as upsides. Bottom line is a whole lot more fun, faster because it's lighter. I mean, clutch life, yes, that's of benefit as well, but really what it comes down to is the whole driving experience. When you lose the weight as well, the car just feels better. Now, some downsides. I like the stability control better in the Ferrari than the G. Actually, I like Ferrari stability control better than all Lamborghini stability controls. On the G, you only have on and off. Now remember too that that's calibrated for an all-wheel drive, so it is different for the rear wheel and tends to be a bit overbearing. On the other side of it is if you shut it off, it is definitely a lot more lively than before. So I would recommend considering getting some tow in so you don't have a ton of oversteer, because you will definitely feel it and you want to have a whole lot of self-control. Other than that, I would say that it's a win-win. Hopefully all that information will help you make the decision of whether or not you want to do the rear-wheel drive conversion, or give you the technical information to do it yourself if you decide to go down that path. As far as me, there's no looking back. I will just continue moving forward, and I'm going to take off and enjoy my time in the G. Have a great weekend. See you next time.